The Kansas City Royals fired Dayton Moore. Looking back on this awful season of Kansas City Royals baseball, but looking ahead on what might be a very bright future of Kansas City Royals baseball. All of that and more coming up on today's Locked On Royals podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your teams every day.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Royals podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your teams every day. I am your host, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Royals. Email the show lockedonroyals@gmail.com. On today's show, we're going to dive into the Kansas City Royals firing Dayton Moore after what's been a awful baseball season. But looking forward to how the Royals move on from Dayton Moore and in this interesting era of Royals baseball, because there's not a totally great way to summarize it or feel about it or frame it even. I do want to thank you first and foremost for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you talking Royals baseball. For your second listen, go check out the Locked On Chiefs podcast, talking about that thrilling primetime win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Check that out wherever you get your podcast from as well. But the Kansas City Royals did it. They finally did it. They finally fired Dayton Moore. After, decades of being the GM of the Royals since, 2003, he was finally fired. And I understand, if there are conflicting feelings for this move. Since 2006, he's been in office. He went to 2 World Series and won a World Series under his leadership. But to me, Dayton Moore has always been overrated, has always been terrible, and I've said as much for the last 3 years in this podcast. I think he's a great person. I think that he's a great leader of a community in the sense of, would I want him in charge of the Royals community outreach program? Absolutely. Would I want him in charge of the Royals baseball operations? Absolutely not. Look, 2 postseason runs, no matter how those runs end, 2 postseason runs since 2006 is just not acceptable. In baseball, where parity runs high, and now even, having more playoff teams than ever at this point, picking at the top of the draft perennially since 2006. He built the best farm system in baseball. It was the one time in which everyone agreed what the best farm system in baseball was that, Hosmer Moose farm system. And all he had to show for it was 2 postseason runs. 2 very fluky postseason runs at that. I think if we take a step back and realize that in 2014, if the A's don't choke, and in 2015, if Carlos Correa can field a ground ball, that the Royals fan base feels totally different about Dayton Moore. So I'm not going to personally grade Dayton Moore on the mishap of the Oakland A's or the mishap of Carlos Correa, Gold Glove caliber shortstop that made a terrible play. Lucas Duda not being able to throw home. The Blue Jays choking away that series. Right? Because it's funny how we do this, right? We grade the results. The results on this could be wildly different. It could be a wild card appearance in a division win. That's it. Since 2006. But the team got over the mountaintop. They won the World Series. They made it in 2014. And that was the best years of watching baseball of my entire life. They've only made the playoffs twice in my entire life, but even just taking off the rose-colored glasses, that those two teams were incredibly fun to watch and watch them put together and manufacture runs, manufacture wins. Something that we don't do in modern-day baseball anymore. In modern-day baseball, it's a lot of boring, irrelevant sitting and waiting. You're sitting and you're waiting on that home run to come, and maybe it will, maybe it won't. And when that home run comes, you've seen a home run a million times. There's only so many ways that a ball can get over the fence. You've seen one home run, you've seen them all. But the way that those Royals manufactured runs and manufactured wins was unique and different every night. It was Billy Butler getting a steal because you were facing a pitcher that was deathly afraid to throw over to first. He thought that the world would end and his arm would fall off if you go to first base. It was utilizing pinch runners, and it was just a romanticization of what baseball used to be. And that's all great, and I'm glad that all that happened. I'm glad that the Royals got to the World Series twice. I'm glad that they won it once. But Dayton Moore, as a president of baseball operations, is terrible. And he's especially terrible for a small market club. He's especially terrible for a club that doesn't have the resources to spend a lot of money. In a situation like Kansas City, in a situation like Cleveland, in a situation like Tampa Bay, in a situation like those small markets, you have to be shrewd, you have to be calculated, you have to operate not as a family, but as a business. It's trading away Longoria. It's trading away guys who have career years in your city that your fan base grows attached to, but you can get value for unknown players that eventually become World Series heroes. It's doing those kind of things. It's scouting, evaluating, developing, and drafting very well. Things that Dayton Moore did not do. How many top overall picks, top 10 picks did Dayton Moore scout, evaluate, draft, and they are terrible, never to be found again in the big leagues? I mean, look at this current group. Dayton Moore, for the last 7 years, has been telling you about drafting college pitchers, been telling you about how, 2022, that's our year to win. Then 2022 rolled around, and at the start of this year, before the year even started, it's actually going to be 2023. Then we get to see how 2022 unfolds, and I ask you, of those college pitchers you shoved down your throat, Brady Singer, Daniel Lynch, Jackson Kowar, right, Asa Lacy, of those guys, how many do you think are actual MLB pitchers? Brady Singer is the only one that's ever panned out so far. He's loyal to a fault. That is his biggest flaw as a GM. And it can't work in Kansas City whenever there's no area to supplement that, right? He's loyal to Cal Eldridge, who sucks at his job factually. He's loyal to players who have ran their course in Kansas City, right? A good GM for a small market team, a good GM doesn't bring back Alex Gordon. A good GM trades Hosmer and Moustakas and Kane and all these guys before they hit free agency. They pick Zobrist over Gordon. A good GM is able to let go of Whit Merrifield before he turns into the worst player he's ever been. A good GM in a small market is able to make those shrewd moves, and he was never able to. He cared more about presenting this family ideology. He cared more about presenting this family-friendly environment, and we care about each other. We love each other. We're just one big happy family. We don't watch porn in the locker room. He cared about that. Let me tell you something. No one should care about that. I don't care if these guys text each other every single day. I don't care if they want to hang out over winter breaks. They miss each other so much from being around each other all season long. I don't care if they don't say a word to each other besides in between those white lines. If they can play, they can play. That's all I care about. Can you win baseball games? Can you entertain the people? Can you get to the ultimate goal? Now, there's a line to that, obviously. If you do things that we all agree are just awful, then yes, don't sign that player, don't play that player, don't do anything with that player. But that line isn't, watching porn, or that line isn't, being around for 7 years. We got to keep him around for an 8th year because we've grown accustomed to him. No, if he's been around 7 years and sucks, or he's been around 7 years and the team around him sucks, therefore his value will not be able to be shown on the field, it'd rather be shown in the trade market, then trade him away. This isn't a family. This is a business. And the business and the job and the idea here is to win baseball games. And Dayton Moore did not win baseball games. They were all right in 2013. They were fun in 2013, right? They had that strong. They were in it to the end until they went to Seattle in 2013. 2014 made the playoffs. That was awesome. 2015 won a World Series. That was awesome. 2016 they were fine. Fell apart at the end. Injuries, whatever. That's 4 years of baseball that was watchable. Think about that, folks. That's 4 years since 2016 of baseball that was watchable. The entire rest of his tenure, the entire rest of his career has been unwatchable. Think about that. He's had a job since 2006. From 2006 to 2022, his job as the president of baseball operations has featured 4 seasons in which you could watch from game 1 to 162 and not be a crazy person. Because if you're still watching this team right now, you're a crazy person. That's it. That's the bottom line. So no, I don't feel bad for Dayton Moore. I don't feel bad that they fired him. I'm surprised they fired him because I didn't think that the Royals had it in them to operate like a competent baseball team. That's the only surprising part. But this is now John Sherman's team. I'm willing to count everything that has happened up until this point, even under John Sherman's watch, as the Glass era. Now, it factually won't go down that way. It'll obviously go down in the books that this has all been the Sherman era. But for my personal record book, John Sherman became the owner of the Royals this offseason. We're about to witness how the John Sherman era goes. Who does he bring in as the GM? Does he keep around J.J. Picolio? What moves does he make? Who does he trade away? Who does he keep? Who does he sign? He says he's sick of losing. Let's see if we agree with his assessment. Let's see if he actually will put his money where his mouth is. We'll talk about that coming up. But first, I want to tell you right now about our good friends over at Built Bar. Built Bar is a fantastic protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar. Go to BuiltBar.com, use the code LOCKED15, get locked on 15 for 15% off. Built Bar's a protein bar, but it tastes like a candy bar. They have fantastic flavors, such as cookie dough. They have brownie chunk, cherry barcia. They have so many great flavors that you're going to want to try out. And I think that you should go over there and just test them all for yourself. It's great pre-workout or post-workout or even as a meal replacement or a snack. Check it out today. That is built.com, promo code LOCKEDON15. That's promo code LOCKEDON15, built.com for the protein bar that is the best on the market. Check it out today. We're back on the Locked On Royals podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Royals. Email the show, lockedonroyals@gmail.com. We're talking Dayton Moore's firing. We're talking about kind of where the Royals go from here. Check out Locked On Chiefs, wherever you get your podcast from as well. Locked On Mizzou, Locked On Jayhawks, hosting College Game Day. They're unbeaten. It's awesome. Got you covered there as well. Locked On K-State, Locked On Cyclones, Hawkeyes, whoever your team of there, we got you. Plus every NBA team, 5 days a week, wherever you get your podcast from. So we're covered with you everywhere, NFL, NBA, MLB, and hockey and college as well. Now look, to me, the Sherman era starts on October 6th. October 6th is when the Sherman era begins. I'm willing to count his record at 0-0. I'm willing to count any transaction that they made up until this point as on Mr. Glass. But he says he's tired of losing. He says he wants to change. Let's see if he does it. Because I get it. It's tough to be in that spot where you buy a team and they have a guy who's a great person. So you can't fire him because you don't like him as a person. He's great for the community. The community really likes him. So you don't want your first move to be firing a guy that everyone loves. And who's won a World Series. Now, again, we just went through the countless flaws in his resume as an actual GM when you get past the fact that it's a shiny trophy, right? Who's a better GM, him or the man in Tampa Bay right now who's gone to a couple World Series but has fallen short in those games? What's the difference? I'd rather have the Tampa Bay track record than the Royals. I'd rather have the Tampa Bay story where you go to the playoffs perennially in the toughest division in baseball, you go to a couple World Series, but you fall short, than for my entire life, over 20 years of living, I've seen 4 baseball seasons in which I could consider watchable. And in those 4, what I consider watchable baseball seasons, only 2 ended in the postseason. So I'd much rather have the Rays track record, right? So he makes the tough decision. He does finally fire Dayton Moore. Now, how does he go? What does he go on with from here? I think that this is interesting because I think that my reaction might surprise you if he just simply elevates JJ Picolia and just keeps him kind of as the main guy. I'm not all out on that. I know I just went through and ragged on all these things about Dayton Moore, but I can understand that there are certain instances where you might work under somebody, you might work closely with somebody, and you guys might not have those same ideologies that, and share the same philosophies. You might think the complete and total opposite of somebody that you work close with or you work underneath, but it's not your call right now. So you just got to take note of what they're doing, take note of how you would do it better or differently, even because we don't know if it's better yet, but differently, and move forward with that information. So I'm willing to give JJ a shot and not just automatically assume that he is Dayton Moore Jr. But no matter who is filling that seat, what I want to see from Kansas City is shrewdness, is business decisions to make the baseball team as good as they can be. I don't care for my GM to be my community outreach leader. You know what the Royals should do? They should hire a community outreach leader. That is their entire job, is to bridge the gap between the Royals and the community, is to put on fun things, engaging things, successful things, meaningful things for the community to help grow and develop the city and the surrounding areas of Kansas City. That's what they should hire somebody to do, just that job alone. When they hire their GM, though, he should be in charge of how can the Royals be the best version of themselves on the field year in and year out. That's the only thing that should matter. And since 2006, that's been one of the last priorities. The first priority has been, how do we sell everyone on this whole family environment? How do we sell the media, sell the fans, sell the players, sell everyone on, oh, we're such a tight-knit family group, that's such a fun environment. What's that ever gotten you? It's gotten you 0 free agents. It's gotten you 0 winning seasons. It's gotten you nothing. Doesn't sell the place out. Doesn't do anything. That's been the first priority. The second priority has been, how do you save money? How do you cut costs? How do you make a profit on this team? Then maybe how do you improve the team? How do you get good on the field? That's been the last thing people care about. That has to be the first thing from now on. Because I've got to tell you, you come knocking on the door for a stadium, and I bet you there will be some pushback. It's all fine and well to want to move downtown, and I'm in favor of stadiums in general being downtown, in downtown areas. However, if you want that funded by the people, if you want that funded by the taxpayers, you better have a good product. You better have some hope moving forward. In baseball especially. A lot of people don't like baseball anymore. Can't blame them, especially if you've grown up your whole life as a Royals fan. A lot of people don't see the value in it. And would you rather spend that money on building this fantastic, world-class downtown ballpark, because you shouldn't build anything less if you're going to build one, you might as well build it the best it can be, or would you rather go big fish hunting and, revamp the T-Mobile Center, or just completely make a brand new downtown arena in hopes of luring away an NHL team or an NBA team or expansion teams in either league? Two leagues, at least the NBA, I can't speak for hockey, but the NBA, a more profitable league, a more entertaining league, a league that can more benefit the culture of Kansas City and fits in with the culture of Kansas City than baseball. Which would you rather do? That's a long ways away. That's a totally different discussion, but the bottom line is the Royals right now are in a disastrous state. This was supposed to be for 5 years. Count them. Go back. This isn't a made-up number. Look it up. For 5 years, Dayton Moore's told the media, and they've relayed to you, and they've been carrier pigeons for this organization. They've been parrots for this organization, parroting to you, oh, give him time. He's such a good guy. Give Dayton more time. They're going to win in 2022. They're going to win in 2022. They're going to win in 2022. And then spring training came this year and said, oh, they're going to win in 2023. Don't worry about this year. It'll be 2023. And not only are they no closer to winning, they're further away. They're now the last place team in the division. They are now fighting their guts out to be above 400. Folks, not 500. They're fighting their guts out to be a above 400 team, to win more than 400% of their games. They're fighting and clawing and scratching to do that. They're terrible, folks. They're terrible. And every young player, besides Brady Singer and Bobby Witt Jr. and MJ Melendez, suck. Now, they might not suck next year because you might fire the manager, you might fire the pitching coach, you might get new eyes on these young guys that do have talent inside of their bodies that you can maybe extract with a new coaching staff. But for the time being, you have 4 competent ball players and a .400 record. That's where the Sherman era is starting. What can he do with it? Where can he go from here? How can he improve, and how can he mold this franchise into its own? The reason that I'm so confident in John Sherman, is because he's done this before. He's been a part of good, small market clubs. Look at Cleveland. Every year we say Cleveland, oh, Cleveland. They lost this guy. They lost that guy. Their roster just does not jump out at me at all. Their roster just does not look that impressive. They might finish 3rd or 4th. Heck, they might finish 5th in the division behind these 2 scrappy Royals and Tigers clubs. How many years have we said that in a row now? Yet every year they win the division. Every year they're a wild card team. Every year they're in the playoffs. Because they don't have the star power, but they have players who can win. Players who are talented at baseball. They're not trotting out Ryan O'Hearn for the 5th straight year. They're not trotting out 7 guys who statistically are the worst players in baseball. He's done this before. He's been there before. He's seen success by working in the margins and finding the areas in which the Royals can steal players, steal games, steal wins. If you can win in Cleveland, you can win in Kansas City. So let's see it. Let's see it. But I think that we should all agree that this is the starting point for Mr. Sherman's Royals, and that you're starting from ground zero. Now, if they surprise next year and they're awesome, or they go to the playoffs, whatever they do next year is house money. This is the starting point. Your expectation for the Royals next year should be to finish dead last. And if they finish any better than that, then that's just a cherry on top. But this is it. You're starting from ground zero without a GM, hopefully in a couple of days without a manager, and you're resetting everything. The scary part is, with MJ Melendez and Bobby Witt Jr., your two best players for the future, you've only got 5 years to get this right before they're free agents. And at that time, if they're as good as we think that they are, you will not be able to re-sign them. You don't have the money to compete in the arms race of Major League Baseball in Kansas City. So can you revamp this entire roster, revamp this entire organization, revamp this entire culture in 5 years? And will we see the most important thing in Kansas City Royals baseball be winning again? Or will it be going to the back burner again? Let's see. See you later, Dayton Moore. Again, great guy, great person. Not a good GM. Factually, not a good GM. In fact, I think if you ranked every GM in the sport that's ever won a World Series, he's probably the worst GM ever to win a World Series. He did one thing well, and that was build bullpens. Everything else on the baseball field, he did terrible. Everything else in constructing a baseball team, he was awful at. Couldn't pick a manager. Couldn't pick ball players. But he can maneuver and craft a bullpen. So we'll see. It can't get worse, folks. I mean, honestly, it can't get worse. You're a bad weekend away from being a below 400 baseball team. It cannot get worse. So you should not fear for the future. You should be hopeful for it. Because what Dayton Moore did was drive this team so far into the dirt that there is no more dirt to dig. You've hit bedrock. You're either going to climb out of it or stay right here, but it can't get any lower. So you might as well take the shot, fire Dayton Moore, fire Mike Matheny, and see what you can do. We'll talk about this all week long on Locked On Royals. So subscribe for free across all platforms, and until tomorrow, be good and be good to one another.